All right, time to dive into this mountain of leatherworking stuff you sent us.
It's quite the collection. Looks like we've got Otis Ingram's book in here.
Yeah, and some Russian YouTube videos, even a little bit of historical stuff.
So it seems like you're ready to get serious about this craft.
Definitely. We're going to really try to understand leather today.
Sounds good.
Like, what are the different types?
Right.
What makes them right for certain projects?
Of course.
And even some techniques to think about when you're working with it.
When I was going through Otis Ingram's book, I thought it was interesting how approachable he made it seem.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I loved that bit about being able to do leather work in a hotel room.
That was great. Unlike, woodworking or something where you need a whole shop.
Totally.
Yeah.
You mentioned Barnes.
Yeah. And with a pretty small set of tools, too.
Speaking of tools, he does have that list of 10 essentials, right?
He does.
It's stitching clamps, a diamond, all harness needles, pricking iron hole punch set, oblong punch scalpel, a skeeving knife, a wooden strap cutter, and rivet setting tools.
That's quite the list.
It is, but that's all you need to get going.
What stood out to you on that list?
Maybe that skeeving knife.
Oh, yeah. That's not something you see every day.
Not at all.
It's so cool how he explains how to thin down leather edges with it.
Yeah.
Makes such a difference for getting those clean looks and tight joins in your work.
Okay, so let's talk about leather itself.
Sure.
Otis makes this comparison to wine.
Oh, I loved that. It's like just as different grapes make different wines,
Yeah.
different tanning processes make totally different leathers.
Okay, so what are the main types of tanning we need to know?
Well, you've got your vegetable tanning and your chrome tanning.
Oh.
Vegetable tanning is the old school way,
Right.
using natural tannins from plants.
Interesting.
It takes longer, but you get this super firm, durable leather that's great for saddles and belts and things like that.
And chrome tanning, that's the newer, quicker way, right?
Exactly. It uses chromium salts, and the leather ends up softer and more pliable.
I see.
Good for jackets and upholstery.
Ah. So it's just like you wouldn't use a Cabernet Sauvignon for a light summer drink.
Yeah,
You wouldn't use chrome tanned leather for a heavy duty tool belt.
exactly. You've got it. And then there's the whole concept of the grain of the leather, too.
Okay, now this is where I get a little lost.
Yeah.
What exactly does grain mean in this context?
Think of it as the pattern on the surface of the leather.
Okay.
And it all depends on what part of the animal hide it came from.
Makes sense.
Otis talks about cuts like shoulder button bend.
Right.
Each one's got its own grain and characteristics.
So it's not just about choosing chrome or vegetable tanning, but also the right part of the hide.
Exactly. It's all connected. And this is where I think those Russian YouTube videos come in.
Okay, how so?
They talk about this idea of encriforna, which means topology of the hide.
That sounds pretty fancy. What does that actually mean, like in a practical way?
Basically, it's about understanding how different parts of the hide have different strengths, different stretch, and how well they work for different projects. It kind of builds on what Otis was talking about with the different cuts.
So if you're making a wallet, you'd choose one part of the hide, but for a sturdy bag, you'd need a totally different section.
Exactly. And the videos really emphasize how important this is for making durable, high-quality stuff, especially if you're making what they call a hookup, which means heavy-duty items.
It makes sense. It's like choosing the right wood for a building. You wouldn't use balsa wood to build a house, would you?
Exactly. You need the right material for the job.
I'm starting to see how the type of leather, the tanning, and even the part of the hide all make a difference.
Yeah, once you get the basics, it changes how you look at your leather stuff.
For sure. And it's not just about how strong something is either.
Right. It affects the look and the feel, too.
Totally. I was looking at Otis Ingram's book, and one project that really caught my eye was the waste paper bin.
Oh, yeah.
It's amazing how stylish a waste paper bin can be.
It's interesting how he mixes leather and woodworking in that one. It shows how leather doesn't have to be the only material. It can make other materials look even better.
He uses this reverse cross-stitching to attach the leather to the wooden base.
Cool.
Not only does it look really cool, but it's supposed to be super strong too.
He's really big on making things that look good and work well.
Definitely. And that magnetic notice board is a clever idea too.
Yeah.
Instead of a boring old corkboard, you get this nice leather surface
Yeah.
with hidden magnets to hold stuff up.
I like how precise you have to be with that one.
Yeah.
He's really careful about covering the steel base with the leather,
Yeah.
making sure the edges and corners look perfect.
Makes sense.
Yeah.
Remember those stitching techniques we were talking about?
Yeah.
He uses saddle stitching for the edges of the leather.
Nice.
Gives it that handmade look and makes it strong.
It's all about the details. It's the difference between something mass-produced and something really well made.
I'm also loving that hanging mirror project.
Yeah.
It's such a classic design.
Leather's so timeless, isn't it?
Totally. That one's a good example of form and function.
Yeah, you've got the mirror framed in the leather,
Right.
but then he adds that pocket and the hooks, so you can actually use it to store stuff.
I love that. He uses thick bridal leather for the frame,
Oh, nice.
gives it that sturdy, luxurious feel. And he uses a round knife to cut the leather straps,
Smart.
so he can get those smooth curves.
He thinks of everything, and then he suggests using different colored leather for the pocket.
Right, to give it some visual
It's
interest.
those little touches that really elevate it. You
Mm.
know, even a simple project can have so much thought put into it.
For sure. And it's not just about the leather itself either.
You're right. He talks about the hardware too, like rivets, making
Yeah.
sure everything is strong and looks good.
I'm getting inspired to try a leather project myself. Maybe something easy like a key fob or a coaster.
Those are great places to start. You can get the basics down without getting overwhelmed. And don't forget, those YouTube videos are great for learning step by step.
They are. You know, looking at all this, I'm realizing there's so much more to leatherworking than I thought.
There really is. Oh,
It's not just belts and wallets. It's a whole world of possibilities.
and we've barely scratched the surface.
I know.
In the last part of our deep dive, we're going to look at some more advanced stuff like leather forming and marquetry.
And that sounds really cool. I can't wait to see how leather can be turned into 3D shapes and crazy designs. Okay, we're back and ready to finish up our leatherworking deep dive.
Are you ready for some really cool stuff?
I think so.
Good, because we're going to be looking at leather forming and marquetry.
I'm intrigued. Let's start with leather forming. What is that exactly?
Well, it's kind of like sculpting, but with leather.
Okay.
You use water to make it soft, and then you mold it into different shapes.
Those YouTube videos showed a pretty simple technique using a bowl as a mold, right?
Yeah. They soak the leather in water until it's nice and pliable.
Right?
Then they carefully shape it over the bowl and use staples to hold it in place until it dries.
Makes sense.
And when you take it off, you have a perfect leather bowl.
It's amazing how water can transform leather like that. Otis actually takes it a step further with his lampshade project.
Oh, yeah. He uses wet forming to make this really unique shape for the lampshade.
Cool.
It gives it that one-of-a-kind look. And he even talks about adding extra details with embossing tools or dyes.
So you can get really creative with it.
Yeah.
What about marquetry? I've heard of it with wood, but how does it work with leather?
It's the same concept. You're creating designs by putting together small pieces, but instead of wood, it's little pieces of leather, almost like a mosaic.
Oh, wow.
So you can make all sorts of patterns and pictures.
Otis uses marquetry in his tiled trolley project, right?
That's right. He uses all these different leather scraps, cuts them into shapes,
Uh-huh.
and then carefully arranges them on the trolley.
That takes some serious patience.
It does. He really emphasizes precise cutting and placement to get that smooth and eye-catching look.
I can see that.
Yeah.
It's amazing how something as simple as putting little pieces of leather together can create something so beautiful.
It really shows the artistry of leatherworking. And if you're feeling really ambitious, Otis has a project for a leather tabletop using marquetry.
Wow, a whole tabletop.
Yep. Imagine having a dining table with a unique leather marquetry top. It's the kind of thing that could become a family heirloom.
It really shows you how far you can take it.
Yeah.
So after all this, what's the biggest takeaway for someone who wants to get into leatherworking? What's the one thing that really sticks out?
I think the biggest thing is that leatherworking rewards patience, precision, and a willingness to try new things.
Yeah.
Don't be afraid to experiment, mess up, and learn as you go.
It's about understanding the material, respecting it, and then using it to create something both beautiful and useful.
Exactly. And you never stop learning. There are always new techniques, tools, and ideas to discover.
Well said. I think that's the perfect way to wrap things up. This deep dive has been a fascinating look at leatherworking. I feel like I've learned so much.
It's been fun exploring this with you.
And a big thank you to you, our listener, for joining us on this journey. We hope you've learned something new, and maybe you're even feeling inspired to give leatherworking a try yourself. Until next time, keep diving deep.